Now, as I was saying, as I was saying, because I left off to the point that after she tells the council, fine, I'm guilty, and Hamlin wants to kind of move on to probably put her behind bars or put her on probation, Sally basically says, but know this. But know this. If you do find me guilty, if you put me behind bars, if you put me on probation, or if you just give me a warning, if you just let me off right now, but want to keep a watchful eye on me, she basically tells him, fine, you guys want to find me guilty of treason? Here's what I'll do. I'll remain a freedom fighter, but I will not give any command. I will not give any direct order, even if it's in times of battle or in the middle of a battle. I will not do anything unless I get direct approval from you guys. Then she goes on to say, with the exception of the chaotics who are out of our jurisdiction, I will not give any order whatsoever. But then she goes out to point that even before the council was formed, well, she doesn't really say all this, but she basically goes out to tell them that even before the council was formed, even before New Mobotropolis was formed, even before even before the substitute freedom fighters was formed, even before everything that's taking place now in this issue, she goes on to remind them that she has been defending her people, defending her people for a long time, and that because of this, they can either have her answer directly to them before she does anything, even in the middle of a fight, or they can trust her in the decisions that she makes. Because she, as she has mentioned in this issue, would never do anything to endanger her people. Now, basically, by giving this heartfelt speech, if you will, or not heartfelt speech, but basically giving this reasonable speech and reasonable counter as to why they shouldn't really find her guilty, the council does say, okay, basically does agree to drop the charges and the investigation, leveled at her, except for Hamlin. And then we find out later on, and then we find out when Sally asked Hamlin why, because he used to be one of her freedom fighters, Hamlin goes on to basically say, look, I was one of your substitute freedom fighters, trained by you, by the best, who is one of the best, but even though I was trained by you, you have left me behind. You have left me and everybody else that you trained behind and forgotten. Basically, basically to Hamlin, he's just telling her, hey, out of all those missions you have gone on, you never really called upon us to help you out. You never called upon me to help you out. So that is why, as Hamlin points out, I ran for counselor, to be part of this council. Because if I can't be on the field alongside you, fighting for the freedom of our people, then I will sit behind this big round desk and I will make sure you fight for them correctly. Now Sally tries to tell him, hey, you were never forgotten. You were always one of us. But Hamlin basically says, hey, don't placate me. And as I mentioned, he tells her, I ran for office so I can make a difference. Because if I can't make a difference on the field fighting for them, I'll make a difference. I'll make a difference by being as a counselor and making decisions that are correct for the people. Now, to me, I believe this is hints to maybe a corruption happening. I mean, I mentioned this before that this seems similar almost in some ways, maybe inspired in some ways, but what you saw in the George Lucas Star Wars films. I mean, let's take a look at the prequel films, the first Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, and how the Chancellor got to where he was. I'm just saying, it seems that maybe some of this was inspired. Maybe it's just out of bitterness, but who knows? I'm not saying Hamlin, as I've mentioned probably on the Mobius forums, could be the traitor that Silver was talking about, but perhaps he could be one of the corrupt people that maybe someday gets impeached from the council and told to step down. I don't know. But I'm just saying. And it could also be out of bitterness, but then again, who knows? And as far as Rosemary goes, like I said, I don't know what's up with her agreeing with Hamlin, but I think maybe, even though, I think in a way like Hamlin didn't like having to let Sally off easy or dropping the charges on Sally. I think in a way it's more like a motherly instinct. Maybe she feels, maybe there's more to her than meets the eye with this whole situation. But then again, who knows? And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think the council is going to last much longer in these comic books. I don't think so. Now we go back to the zone, to the no zone, or the zone cop's homeworld. And like I mentioned earlier in part one, we kind of get an explanation from Sonic as to why everything is taking place, why the zones are on lockdown. And as I mentioned earlier in part one, he tells Sonic it's because of Naga, Eggman Naga, who has declared war on them. And then only a few zones have been open to keep Sonic's world stable, while the others have been locked down to keep Naga out of Sonic's world. And basically what we have in the end is we have Sonic and Sonic teaming up, beating down, finally defeating Scourge, putting a control collar on him so that his power, so he doesn't get out of control or whatever. Ever. And then we find out after all this time, because we've been asking this question, and I'm sure Ian's asked this question, as to why Eggman, formerly known as Robo Robotnik, was never taken back by Sonic. And Sonic basically explains to Sonic the Hedgehog that the reason for this is because Eggman, aka formerly Robo Robotnik, has an identical past to the Robotnik that Sonic defeated back in Endgame with up to a certain point. And that because of that, even though it's up to a certain point that they have an identical past, he is essentially the same Robotnik, and that he is needed for Sonic's world to be stable. And that basically Sonic Prime, Sonic the Hedgehog, has to fight a Robotnik, and that this Robo Robotnik, aka Eggman, is the best candidate to fill in. And basically he also tells Sonic that the reason he had to bring Scourge in was because it made his mutation, courtesy of the Chaos Emerald, made Scourge a bit of a wild card. Art in the cosmic things, even though Scourge, as he's being hauled away, says, "Hey, you can call me whatever you want. The truth is, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog at his full potential." Now we have Sonic being escorted home from the no zone, and basically being reunited with his parents, and basically tell him, yeah, I have a minute. After they ask, if Scourge is safely put away, he says yes. And they ask, okay, do you have a minute to rest? And he said yes, but now I got one more fight to go, and that's against Robotnik. And then speaking of Robotnik / Eggman, we have Snively communicating with Regina. Obviously, a lot of people feel as though they know who she is. Robotnik's calling Snively, calling him by his first name, his birth name, which surprises him. Makes him wonder if maybe, Eggman is finally losing all his marbles, and that perhaps, if that's the case, Regina's plan that he's working with her on could be accelerated. This could be the opportunity they look for, until Snively discovers what Eggman, his uncle, if you will, has been working on, which turns out to be the Egg Phoenix. And apparently, this is going to tie into a 3-part story that starts next month. And then we have the side story of Sonic and the Black Knight, which to me could have been saved for Sonic Universe and might be continued on and adapted more onto Sonic Universe in the future. And we see that the Knights of the Black Knight are Knuckles, Shadows, and Blaze. But anyway, overall, I have to say that issue 197 was done very well. Like I said, Ian did answer a lot of questions that we've been wanting answered for a long time. We find out that Hamlin has basically become bitter at the fact that even though Sally trained him and Dylan and Penelope and the others, that he feels as though that even with that they've always been forgotten and left behind. That basically, to me, the way Ian wrote Hamlin is not as a wrote Hamlin is not just because he not just as a being bitter at the fact that he was always forgotten, but basically I think what he was doing was in a way allowing Hamlin a chance to let all the frustration out that towards Sally, like, hey, you trained us, but you never gave us the opportunity. Where was our opportunity? It was never there. That's basically what I think he was trying to do with Hamlin. And the question that we've always wondered about the Eggman, why he was never taken back to the his zone is because he's essentially the same person. So, but overall, I have to say Ian did a good job, and I give it a 5 out of 5, and that's all I can say about it.